Paul, welcome to the show. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Would you take a moment and just give the audience a little info on your background, and then let's dive right in?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm very happy to be here and chat with you both. So my background after college, I moved to Las Vegas, worked in restaurants and wine as a sommelier. It's kind of the end career that a lot of people find interesting. But I had this e-commerce business that I worked in kind of after work and before work, and that turned into this really interesting thing for me. And I departed and created Clicks and Clients and Liftly.com, an advertising agency, about 13 years ago. And so I took it as an initial, hey, if I can make a paycheck and not have to go back to the restaurants, then that's success. And we've obviously grown and done a lot of interesting things since then. But that's a little bit of my background and kind of a long ways from there today. But that's where I got started, selling stuff online initially.
And it seems like, as I was thinking about the conversation, you have different types of clients you work with. I mean, we're selling, you look at our Manage to Win site, we sell consulting and coaching, but really what we're doing a lot more now is with our Habitly.com site, where we sell subscriptions that are as little as, $2 a person for, companies to have their people learn great soft skills to succeed in business. And you probably get people that sell, $5 items up to thousands of dollar items.
Sure.
How does that kind of work, how somebody does a campaign? Because we've done some, but we've never done a serious campaign. So I'm kind of curious what the landscape looks like.
Sure. I think I would break our clients up into three very, very distinct categories. So there's and they're not necessarily our clients per se, but folks that are spending on a budget. So let's say our marketing budget's $3,000 a month. And if we spend $2,800 a month and save $200, that was a big success and it was a win. And if we could spend a little bit less, that's even better. And so there's kind of the budget group, and typically those folks aren't tracking much, probably some very soft metrics that an agency might come back and say, like, for your $2,800, your ad was seen 1 million times and 1,000 people visited the site. And last month, 800 people visited. So we did better, right? Pretty soft metrics usually, and less. Cheaper is definitely better in most cases, or less is better.
Almost sounds like penny wise, pound foolish. I mean,
yeah.
Not that I have an unlimited budget or anybody does, but
sure,
it doesn't sound very strong to me.
We'll find we'll find on these larger spends and bigger spends, and we're getting up to like $1 million a month on the extreme level, is that the more expensive stuff is usually better. And people have figured that out. And so it's easy to do something on the cheap. It's easy to shave a little bit of money. It's easier to get cheaper clicks. It's way easier to get more clicks, but the quality is usually more expensive, and therefore that way for a reason. And we start to kind of get there on the middle, I would call it, bucket of clients where, okay, the average sale is $100. We want a 20% cost of marketing. So if you can drive ads and make sales for $20 a sale to sell a $100 item, that's success. And that's kind of second bucket. And you might start to get into something there where it's, the Facebook clicks are really cheap, but by the time we actually make a sale, it costs us $50 to make a sale. And we're still okay because we're selling a $100 item, versus maybe the Google ads where there's a really high level of intent. Someone's looking for this, the clicks are 3 times as much, but the conversion rate's much higher. And so it only costs us $25 to make the $100 sale, even though on the surface, there's less clicks. They're more expensive.
And what about this stuff that I've heard recently where Facebook, Google ads, the prices are all going through the roof?
Everything's up. Yeah, no doubt about it. Everything's up. Facebook's gotten more expensive. There's less data there. It was to a point with Facebook where maybe it was almost too easy. So you would take an audience, kind of the larger the better. You'd tell Facebook, give me people that will buy the subscription, and kind of let it go wild. And it would do an amazing job at that. It still is really, really good at it, but it's a lot less efficient without a lot less data points. So we almost have to go back to like being better marketers, because it was getting to a point where it was very easy, or heck of a lot easier than it is now. So now you really got to get back to basics, better copy, better creative, better offers, and you just got to work a lot harder. But no question about it, costs are up. So you really got to sharpen the knife that much more on creative messaging copy, in my opinion.
And so what aspects of all this stuff does your agency do? Do you just do the placement of the ads, or do you actually do copywriting for websites for a company? Because like I got IT solution providers and they always have to outsource that nowadays. In the old days, they might put something together, but it was always kludgy and looked terrible. But even if you drive somebody to your site, the copy has to close them. So
100%. And that's all that can be tested with enough data and information. So at the highest level, what we're doing is working with clients who I'd say are in that third bucket, who are looking at lifetime value. And so they're looking at it saying, it's not just a $100 purchase, right? It is a subscription, or someone's coming back, purchasing 4 times. So lifetime value is $400. We'll spend $100 to acquire that $400 lifetime sale. We'll break even on the first sale. And when you take someone that's looking at that, that's running in that way, then you go back to kind of that middle bucket and say, yeah, we're generating sales for $100 a piece. They're like, well, how could you possibly do that? You lose money. And at the highest level, we're really getting into, so we're creating the ads, we're writing the copy, we're doing the placement, but at kind of our highest and best, we're really getting into the nitty-gritty specifics of profitability. And what that might look like could be something to the extent of desktop leads, for example. So desktop leads for this one particular client in the insurance realm are worth about twice as much. Obviously, not as many people are on Facebook on desktop. It's mostly mobile, but we know that as a very specific data point. And so where someone might look at it and say, wow, desktop leads are more expensive. We don't want those, or we should bid these down. We take the opposite approach and we say, we actually want more of them. And when we double the bids to pay twice as much more, we know the costs are going to go up, but we know we're going to generate more leads. And what's the net margin of it? And so there's times where we might suggest to a client, we actually want to pay 50% more because we've doubled the lead volume. Costs have gone up 20%, but gross margin has gone up 50%. Or we might do it the other way and say, I know you want to generate 1,000 leads a day, but it's actually a lot more efficient if we generate 700 at this price. So when we're dealing with lifetime value, we're getting into really nitty-gritty specifics and optimizations pretty far beyond just, we have a $100 product to sell. And if you can do it at 25, great. And if you can do it at 15, even better. And as long as you can do that, kind of the budget's unlimited. So these lifetime value buckets are really where we get the most sophisticated. And if we can bring a client along that way, or we can start to get them into that mode of thinking, or we can even look at something like that desktop versus mobile, knowing that we have that insight from this big spender, and at least begin to look at that with a client that's maybe a little in that bucket too, for example.
And so my understanding correctly, you're saying that desktop leads at Facebook typically have a higher value, at least in some industries, than all the things that are happening in mobile.
Correct. For this particular client.
Exactly. So can you give me an example, like a before and after? I'm sure you have wildly successful stories, but something that's maybe more middle of the road, but still impressive. I mean, where I'm kind of interested in what you did in somebody's website in addition to what you did on the campaign side.
Sure. So there are cases where these accounts are revolutionized, right? Where we have this brilliant insight and we say, aha, this is the headline that makes a big difference. And those do happen sometimes. A lot of times it's a 10% improvement on the copy, 10% improvement on the bidding, 10% difference on the landing page, 10% difference on the follow-up, how quickly you're following up on leads. That can make or break the entire campaign. So we have a client where in the franchise space, and they had an opt-in form on the homepage, and everyone always says, go for the jugular, get the lead. And we tested what felt very contrarian at the time, but we actually put it a couple pages deep to be able to apply for the franchise. And that very oddly to us initially worked better. So there's a lot of times where I think, so we find these contrarian things. Best practices are best practices, I think, from like a scenario, right? Someone did it, it worked. They say this is best practice, but I think it's all up for testing and examination. So we've seen times where people have done something totally opposite, like putting this application for the franchise 2 steps deep to the homepage. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. We had another one with a call center, well, a client in the finance space. They were sending leads to their stores. Actually, I have a better one for you. It was a gym client and gym store retailer, New York and Florida. And they start to do leads. And the sales guys are like, the leads stink. We don't like, they're not any good. And so we're like, oh man, this is a real bummer because we felt like we were really cracking the code here. And so we do some testing and we find out like salespeople just aren't even calling the leads back. And basically, they want someone to come in the store. They want to buy the most expensive treadmill. They want to take the 20% commission. They don't really want to do any work past that. So we install a software that takes the lead, then dials the store. And we're like, oh, we got these guys. Now they got to deal with these leads. And so a couple weeks go by and we go into the software that calls the store and these guys are literally hanging up on the leads. And so the VP of marketing had to like do a road show and travel around all the different stores and train this team on, you got to call the leads back. You got to answer the phone, then you got to call the leads back. And so sometimes we have these insights that are like great in theory, or we know intellectually they make sense, but like boots on the ground, even when making the phone ring for them, like still is not enough. So that one really stands out to me. That person's still a client. They're on their VP of marketing at like the third or fourth company that we've worked with. But these sales guys, they didn't want to do the work. They did not want to do the work at all. And so we went through these different iterations of like, oh, we got them with the software. And it was like, nope, not enough. So it really takes a lot of work on the client side too.
Imagine every client is different, but I was curious is there like a standard process you follow when you're looking at a company that's trying to get leads or set up their marketing? What do you look at first? What's the first question you ask? Like, are we going to focus on the website and make sure that they have a good banner image, or are we going to focus on their marketing? Again, every company's probably different.
Yeah, I think the best testing ground, if it's online and if it's someone's looking for it, is Google AdWords. So Google AdWords is going to tell me pretty quickly, are people looking for this? And then I look at it as kind of a series of tests. So are people looking for it? If no one's looking for it, then probably going to be difficult to foster or create that demand for it. So that's kind of step one, is their search volume for it. If there's search volume for it, then I start to get kind of excited and it's like, all right, maybe there's something here. Second step then, are there other ads there already? So I think there's always the dream of like, we're the first ones to find this honeypot. I don't think there's nothing new under the sun at this point. So I look for ads already being there and I'm like, all right, cool. We got a call from it's a company out of Italy that has a brand. What can I say without saying it? They create lubricants and they want to set up shop in the United States. And it's really stuff for me that's fairly bizarre. Like I've never heard of it. So I go to Google, there's keyword searches for it. There's ads for it. Granger.com is on there, big like industrial supplier. And that's where I'm like, all right, cool. If these guys are doing it, then there's probably a good chance that we could be moderately successful if we do a moderately good job. From there, it's getting people to a site on the page as a very specific call to action, measurable outcome in a perfect world. And often that's sending people to a landing page as opposed to the homepage. General thinking there is they get to the homepage, they start looking around. Who's Jeff? What's David? Let me look him up on LinkedIn. Who is this guy? What do they offer? Where are they located? Oh, wait, they're in Santa Monica. And at that point, they're kind of off the rails and off the map versus a very specific offer, call to action from the ad that's mirrored on the homepage. And at that point, it's generate leads. So I look at it as, is there search volume? Great. Can we put up an ad? Can we get people to click on it? Great. Now that they've got to the website, can we get some people to take the next course of action? Great. And then we can start to worry about following up with ads, drip campaigns, everything else that's to it. But I look at it as kind of a litmus test of, can we start to get a few of these pieces of the puzzle before we go down this like really arduous path of developing a customer journey and a follow-up sequence and this, sales stages and a 50 email autoresponder and a webinar. Like I like to prove the case for the first few things first before we even get to that. Because what I find is these overcomplicated, complex automations, they almost never kind of work as designed in the first place. And they almost kind of never get done. So I'm
sorry, I'm laughing because just it makes sense, but it's like, it's
yeah, let's get an ad, let's get a couple ads up, let's get a couple landing pages up, let's see if we can even get people to click on the ads, let's see if we can get people to fill out the forms before we go to the extreme. And then I think the other good benchmark I think of, Jeff, is let's look at lifetime value and let's spend 1 to 3 times that in terms of an experiment to test the waters. Because a really, really dialed in marketing campaign, a decent marketing campaign is going to be 1 to 3 times return on ad spend if stuff's like doing okay. If you're in like the 5 to 7 times ad spend, you really are like firing on all cylinders. And if you're 10 plus, you're kind of a unicorn, in my opinion. And so if you've got a $25,000 sale, like we're not going to test the waters for $1,000. We're not going to test the waters for $2,000. We'd be lucky to get some ads up and get some clicks, but probably not learn anything super meaningful. So I think having this like lifetime value in the back of our mind and saying like, what do we need to spend to get a decent test without being like wasteful and ridiculous? But also, what do we need to spend to get enough information where we've got like we have a valuable read on how things are going.
Sounds good. Yeah, I appreciate that. Have you ever had when you dive into that, have you ever found that a client is just not there? I mean, it sounds like when you dive into those Google searches and you look at the analytics side of it, if it's not there, it sounds like it's not there.
It's not there. And then it's a conversation of like, it's not there. And there's other ways we can go about trying to reach these folks, but it is a big experiment at that point. So, but a client in the health space, around COVID, product made great sense, market made great sense, but no one was looking for this specific thing because they had basically created it. And so we went to them and said, look, I can target the owners of these businesses on LinkedIn. I can put an ad in front of them. We can see if they'll sign up for a webinar, but it's really, it is a hard and true test at this point.
Yeah, it's hard to create a market that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And the ask for them was to get someone to book a demo. And looking back, like that was a pretty big ask for someone to have never heard of this, to click on an ad, to sign up for a demo, to book themselves a time on a Calendly link. Like it was just a really big ask. And so something maybe smaller scale, could they opt into something, something smaller would have probably been a good expectation setting piece at that point. But that search volume says a lot.
And something smaller would be like a guide or some sort of, hey, download this free guide. We'd love to, help you out, kind of give to the potential customer there.
Yeah, the way I like to think about it is like, so in our world, you've got a not client, and then we've got a client, right? And a client, there's like a ton of stuff that's part of that. We've got Google Analytics and access and creative and approval. And like, there's a million things that go into that. Well, it feels like a million. But then taking a small piece that's a slice of that along the way, and then developing that as an opt-in, I find to be really helpful. So we work on a restaurant project. We were able to connect Google AdWords to go order revenue for this client. And so we did like a how-to piece on how to connect Google AdWords to go orders for this very specific ordering system in restaurants. And that was that was basically the lead magnet. That was the place to get them in, to put up an ad and be like, let us be your agency and give us all your marketing dollars and trust us. It's such a monster, crazy ad, impossible ask. But there's like 5 to 10 things along the way that we can slice off that I think have some interest and some value. And so something like that would have been really cool.
Yeah, it reminds me of all the advice when you head into a negotiation. If you can get the other party to agree to a small thing, maybe you can get them to agree to a bigger thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the restaurant one's so specific too that people looking for this, I think some lights go off when it's really specific. It's like, oh, okay, we use that system. Oh, we have this problem, and we're speaking their language. So I feel like that's a helpful piece to it as well. And not being afraid to get specific. At first, the team internally was like, well, not everyone's on this system and not everyone uses this to go order it. It was like, yeah, who cares? But if someone does use this, they see our ad, they're like, bingo, that's it. So that's been pretty helpful as well.
Right on.
So what's the typical time frame that, or the range of time frames that it might take if someone comes to you and, they need their website copy updated, and then you also got to figure out, how you're going to start to test, or even the time frame to get through some initial testing that someone could expect?
I love working in 90-day sprints. So to me, the world just changes too fast. There's too much stuff going on. And so if we can set a sprint for 90 days, to update the homepage copy, maybe the services page copy, get up a landing page and some ads, that's a pretty good amount to bite off. So I like to work in 90-day sprints or project-based sprints. Webinars are a really easy one to do too as well. And we've had clients in the past who said, like, don't worry about creating the webinar. Just say, let's see if we can get anyone to sign up for it. So we put up a landing page, webinar on 2 Tuesdays from today. And if we can't get anyone to sign up for it, like, don't worry about making the slides. And so we've launched the ads for this training company out of Utah and get some good signups. It's like, hey, you better get to work. Like, people are signing up for this. And then the next question is, well, is anyone going to show up for it? And that's the next question that we need to answer. And then people showed up for it. It's like, okay, now I guess you better follow up with these leads. So go ahead and do that by hand to start, and then we can build some automation around it. So I really like to work in this kind of bite off a piece, test that piece, and then if yes, then go to next. But I do think that 90 days is a pretty good benchmark, and a couple of very specific goals tied to some very specific outcomes is pretty important.
Paul, you're not what I expected. I expected to be on with some guy who was selling hard and super hyped up, and I mean, you sound much more down to earth, and let's be realistic.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. It's hard. I think our best clients too that are at that big spending mark, I think they get like, this is a test. We have some inklings, we have some learnings. No one knows for sure. And their mindset, a few of them, is if we find some nuggets over the course of the year, like this pays for itself so many times over, it's still block and tackle and do the business, and cover the basics well, but this is all a test. It's very fluid, and you just kind of never know what you're going to uncover and find. And so I feel like folks operating at that level know that it is truly hard work, and it's a grind, and it's challenging. And the whiz bang moments are really cool, and like those do exist, and it's fun to make a blog post over those, or it's fun to like write an ad, but those are few and far between, and no one ever talks about like the 10 things that didn't happen, that they tried. So we had a client out of San Francisco, probably 4 or 5 years ago, and we had this Facebook ad that was selling an elliptical machine that was like under your desk. And this ad was spending $10,000 a day, and it was making $30,000 a day in sales. And so at one point, this ad had like 25 million views on it. And one of the consultants on the project took that and like presented it at a marketing event. And it was a really cool story. Like, here's why video is really great on Facebook, and people comment on it and they share on it. But what he didn't talk about was like the 8 other products that we tried the same exact thing for that had like a wide variety of break even to like totally flame out. And that sticks in the back of my mind. If like he's up on stage, it's like, oh, these video ads are so great, and Facebook's so great, and like totally true, but not like the entirety of it. And so I just think that like honest, hard work, realistic expectations is like the reality of the work that we do. At least that's what I see.
Did that one success at least cover the cost of the others?
Yes, kind of, sort of temporarily until that client went out of business. So it was a venture-backed company, and really smart people with very amazing pedigrees. And when we initially came in, it was our lifetime value of a client is this, so like just get sales. And then at some point, we're looking at it and we're like, these Swell water bottles are like $30 a piece, and it's costing us $60 to make a $30 sale. Like, do we really know that people are coming back and like buying 6 more of them? And so they brought in a new CEO who then said, look, I'll only spend money if, I'll only spend $1 if I get $3 in return. And that got him to a certain point and eventually ended up kind of liquidating the business. That CEO went on to run a really interesting company that you would know of that deals in mattresses, like very sharp, very smart. But there was a time where it was like maybe more money than sense, probably before him. And so that one was a super success, but the other 9, like we had such a range to not be successful that it was eventually someone pays the piper. That's the other thing that I've learned, right? It's like eventually someone's got to pay the piper. And so now when we're in these moments where it's like, yeah, our average sale is this and these water bottles, who cares? I think we're a little more vocal about like, I know you say you don't care, but in 6 months, we're going to get a phone call. And, that's going to be the end of the project or the relationship. And so we try and head those off at the pass, I think, more so now than we probably did in the past. At that point, it was like, let's go. Let's sell more water bottles. If
do you ever have a client that says, we have X amount to spend each month? And so let's say, you go out and you spend X and they bring in the revenue target that they wanted to bring in.
Yep.
But you spend that X in the first, 5 days. Do they then give you that X back again because they got the number? So they just there's a multiplier there. So as long as it's paying, keep spending it. But each time our budget is X.
Yeah. There's less of a budget typically. It's usually in those cases, it's more of like, if this is the return on ad spend, then keep it going. So there's usually not a budget as opposed to a return on ad spend goal. So we have a client that sells an online course and we know we need to be 3 to 1. And so we just spend until we kind of reach the end of what we can spend in that given market. There's times we've got this new golf project. The leads are looking pretty good. They're booking into appointments for this particular project. We spent pretty quickly knowing it was a test, and they've just greenlighted like, okay, keep going. We'll bite off another piece. I'd say that's a little more common. Like, we're hitting our base metrics. We haven't closed any deals yet, but we like the lead flow. The sales guys are happy. They're turning into bookings. Like, keep stepping on the gas a little more. I'd say that's a little more common.
Okay. And then it sounds like a lot of your clients, they're selling big money items. Is there still an opportunity to do these types of campaigns for, something that's lower priced? I mean, although our habitly.com sells for, as low as $2 a person, on certain subscriptions, some of those subscriptions might be $25, some might be $50, but, some of them might be individuals at, $5 a piece. Is there still a market where something like that can make money?
Yeah. Our smallest, the one I was just describing with the 3 to 1 ratio, the average sale there's about $27. And so one of the things we started to look at with them is you sign up, then you don't pay right away. So we're looking at payment ratio of desktop versus mobile. And 90% of people on desktop pay immediately, and about 50% of people on mobile pay immediately. That edges up over 3 weeks, but we know it only edges up so much. And so we initially looked at it and we said, we're making money. We got the 3 to 1. Now let's get a little more sophisticated on this payment ratio and start to divide these out. And I'd say the other thing with these big spenders that we try and borrow is that they just monetize these leads so many different ways. So if there is a way to monetize them beyond the initial sale, that's often the key in these larger spends that maybe wouldn't make sense to other people on the surface. But they'd look at it and say, well, it's only $27. How could you possibly, spend $30 to make a $27 sale? Well, that's because the call center, is incentivized to send people off to a partner for this related product. And 1 out of 10 people do that. That makes an extra $4 a lead. And so what I've seen on these big spenders is that they're monetizing this a bunch of different ways. Or the other, I guess it's not in terms of a large ticket item. One of the other large spenders, a portion of their leads don't buy, a large portion, about 80% don't buy on the first clip. But 20% of those people will come back at some point in the course of the next few years. And when those folks finally do get pitched, without giving too much away, they're 3 times more likely to buy. So the thought process there is, it is more expensive. Getting someone to buy something like that isn't instantaneous, but that's really the profit margin for the entire business. And so kind of basically working it harder and working it more on these smaller dollar items, I think is the key to really expanding it. This
Do
3 to 1.
do your clients, when it's like a subscription, you mentioned subscription, do they offer a free trial period, or do they skip that so they can get the revenue in and keep the...
Go to the jugular. You got to test it. Yeah, you got to test it. I know folks that have gone the opposite way, that instead of selling the small subscription, they go for like purchase a year or 2 in advance. And their take is, if we just go for the jugular, we get way more than trying to haggle with like $7, $10 a month kind of thing. So we're really going for the annual sale. So that's a different way to look at it as well.
I've actually seen that more often now with a lot of places where they quote a per month cost, but they require you to buy a year.
Right. You can do more on the monthly, but it's 10% more because there's a premium for it. But hey, just go for the annual.
Yeah, it's usually more than that as a premium on the monthly too. It's much more. It's more like 20%, 25%. So, Jeff, you got any other questions?
Ski school. This online ski school got me last night. I signed up for. I go, I'm just going to do quarterly. I'm just going to do the quarterly one instead of the monthly because that's too much, and the annual, that's a little more than I want to spend. So let's see how the first quarter goes. And then the upsell was for the annual for $100 less, and I was like, dang it, got me. Like, it was really good. I was super impressed.
Right. So you were going to sign up for a quarterly ski school, but then the annual price was $100 less
on the upsell page after you hit purchase.
Yeah.
So it was $50 a month. It was $50 a month for monthly. It was $125 a quarter, where it was $399 a year. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to spend $399. Like that's a bit too much. And so when I clicked quarterly, it said, well, wait a second, and then the upsell came, and the upsell was, I think it was $225. I was like, well, it's cheaper than 2 quarters. I got to do it now.
But how do you do ski school year round, even in Denver?
Exactly. South America.
Yeah, there you go.
Dry land trading. So yeah, they got me on that one too. So it does work. And I know what's going on to some extent too. They still got me. It was great.
Well, Zig Ziglar used to say that the salespeople love to buy.
100%.
Yeah. Jeff, you got anything else?
I don't have anything that comes to mind. I'm thinking about what we need to do. I'm doing a lot of thinking about recently. Been listening to Donald Miller at Story Brand. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah. Love it. Yeah. Love it.
So he's as popular in the marketing space as he is in normal space, I would call it, where I am.
100%. Yeah. The client is the hero, right?
That's right. Yeah. When you were talking about
you're the guide.
When you were talking about how when someone visits your website, if they're starting to wonder who you are and look at your story, or they're saying, okay, David and Jeff came from here and there, and they're looking at this and that. That totally struck me as this is definitely the wrong place. We don't want our people looking here. We want, obviously they can look and see wherever we are, but we want them focused from a marketing and sales perspective on the journey we're trying to help them with, how we're going to guide them to the place where they want to get to. I thought that was really poignant.
Yeah, it's so great. It's so great. His examples are great. It's just, and when you see it in action, it's like, of course. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Doing it's challenging. It takes some iterations of copy, but yeah, I think it's so fantastic.
Is there anyone else like that you take inspiration from? I'd be just curious. I'm diving into it more myself.
Perry Marshall's kind of my old, mentor guide. Not necessarily around copy, but this like idea of optimization, and turning the dials like at each step, as opposed to this like whiz bang piece. I've always kind of loved his overarching theory of like, let's just write 10% better of an ad. Let's just write 10% better. Let's have a website, a landing page that converts 10% better. Hey, let's just call the leads back 10% quicker. Let's just, let's do everything a little bit better. And those tweaks and dials, they really add up. So his take is it's compounding effect. And I would say that's pretty magical. And that's where that's where the rubber meets the road, I think.
It sounds like the Kaizen method, a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's cool. I guess my last question would just be kind of what would be your initial advice or parting advice for someone like us that's looking to launch a product in the next 90, 180 days and really start a sales marketing effort that we want to succeed?
Yeah, I would have some very clearly defined, some very specific measurements right off the bat, knowing that they're going to change. And then I would have kind of a range of like a keep kill, so we're going to have a landing page. We're going to have this opt-in for this particular problem. And we're committed to getting 100 people to the page at a minimum. And if we get 40 people to the page and it's looking like it's not working, we're not going to give up on it. I think that's pretty important. And I also think there's 3 pieces to the puzzle. So long term, I would say it's kind of a flywheel approach. The SEO is a great example of that. It stinks, it's hard, takes a lot of time. But anyone that's like truly done it and stuck with it never regrets it. Best quality traffic, converts the best, hands down, but it stinks and like you want to give up on it. That kind of flywheel, like it's hard to get it going. And then you have to have a pay to play component. So Google ads, Facebook ads, you got to pay. If you pay, they will come. If you don't pay, it turns off. And then the third portion of it, I would say, is kind of a shot in the arm, like a convention or an event where it's like a great shot in the arm, but it doesn't last super long. And once it's over, it's over. I think you really have to have a combination of the 3. But I think I really strongly believe the paid ads are the testing ground to figure a lot of this stuff out before you kind of go off into different directions. And then if it's not working, the diagnosis tool is it a strategy issue or is it an execution issue? So do we have the right strategy, but a copy on our page stinks? We need to switch the copy, or is it the right strategy, but we're executing poorly? The ads aren't well written. So I think those are good diagnosis tools when inevitably whatever you're going to do doesn't work to some extent. And like fingers crossed, toes crossed that your stuff does right out of the gate. But if and when it doesn't, the diagnosis to me is either a strategy error or an execution error. And being able to kind of diagnose that, the next steps will get you through the iterations you need to make this thing work, because it's going to take some iterations, no doubt about it.
Yeah, right on. I actually thought of one more question. I noticed on your LinkedIn that you're connected with John Durham of Catalyst SF.
Yeah.
He was my marketing professor at University of San Francisco.
Oh, cool.
I worked as an intern for him there at Catalyst my senior year.
When I was just starting off, when I left the restaurant, I was at this Las Vegas like marketers meetup, and I sat next to him, and I kind of had no idea who he was. And I met him, like friended him on LinkedIn, and every once in a while I call him up just to say hi, like, hey, I'm starting this business. And he was kind enough to give me the time of day and have some chats with me. And then I realized like, oh, he's like this guy's a pretty big deal. And that was really cool. But yeah, I maybe not hassled. I reached out for guidance early on. He was kind enough to answer the phone.
That's exactly the way I would put it. Kind enough to answer the phone. Like there's a lot of people that would not be kind enough to answer the phone, but he's
100%.
Definitely a big deal. And yeah, I remember he took me out for lunch. I was going through a difficult time one week, and he was very kind. And also, I love to share stories about his work experience and just teach us what he knew. Yeah. Just story after story about, hey, this is how you do this. This is how you do that. Advice. We're going to talk to a client. I remember we went to I forget the name of it, and I'm struggling to describe what it was, but basically they served video ads. They had the technology that served video ads. We went there for a pitch, and he involved everyone in the pitch. He involved, we were all there. Like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I've never worked in this space, and I'm just learning. I'm doing all the basic stuff, and he was very generous. A great guy.
He's the guide, right? He's not necessarily the superstar in the scenarios, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, he's a superstar in his own right. He doesn't even need to be there.
Doesn't need it. Yeah. But he's like the good Jedi guide. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's very cool. Awesome.
Paul, this has been a joy. This has been great. Great timing too, this time of year to get together. So will you please remind the audience, if they want to get a hold of you, how do they get a hold of you?
Sure. It's clients at clicksandclients.com, which is our really wordy initial URL from 13 years ago, or paul@liftly.com. Liftly is our hospitality-focused agency/brand.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. And thanks, Jeff, for being part of this show. I think it adds to it. You should come back more often.
Thank you both so much. Pleasure to meet you.